I can fully see a couple of treks, maybe to Selhurst or over to Fulham or something like that, just to remember what it was like. A stadium similar, um, but nothing is going to match what White Hart Lane was. Just as you said, being on top of the pitch, Sam, and enjoying that that guttural chant, that Tottenham roar, that
Yeah.
whatever it was that made White Hart Lane so special that I do remember just from going the one time. But you went to the last North London derby and then the last match. It was over exemplified for you. That has to be just something that you'll get to carry with you to your grave. How important those two matches were, plus what you got out of that from an emotional standpoint.
Yeah, I think the big thing here is that the game is changing. A new, as Chair said, I mean, there's a new generation of football fans, and they've had to steal a page, from a commercial revenue perspective, from U.S. sports, and a Premier League match needs to be a family day out. They need to get people, in and around that stadium as early as possible, get them to stay as late as possible, get them to spend as much money as they can. And I hate. And I don't want that to cheapen from the focus on the football, but in order to stay commercially viable and compete, we started the show sort of lamenting about our depth. Well, we've talked about the fact that maybe we just don't have the finances to do it, and this style of football entertainment is the way that we go about doing it. So it's just, it's as I said, the game is changing. We're certainly not going to be the last of the new flashy stadiums that offer a football entertainment experience. So in 10 years, this won't feel so bad.
I guess you're right, and I guess that's a hard thing for a lot of people to swallow, and it's going to be an interesting transition. As more money is dumped into this league, you've got to feel that NBC is going to renew their television contract and throw even more money the way of the Premier League and advertising and stadium right money and everything else. It's going to allow more clubs to do exactly what we are doing. So one day, Craven Cottage may go by the wayside. Selhurst may go by the wayside. All London clubs may go by the wayside in terms of what their historic, as Julie Welsh put it, their marital home. For people who have been going to the same stadium their entire lives, they may slowly start to fade away and become these, big, gigantic 35, 45, 50, 70,000 seat stadiums. So it'll be interesting to see what happens. What was different now? Why is this now? It's always been the world's game, but it took so long for America to accept it as one of the big five, if you will. Basketball, baseball, football, hockey, and this. And now it's finally here. I think television did that. I don't think that anything from an American perspective did that. I think television changed the game. Television is what brought me into the Premier League. I think it's what brought Tim into the Premier League. And I think it's what's bringing in newer folks.
FIFA brought me in.
EA Sports brought in. Yeah. So I think it's going to be interesting to see what the future holds. And for the first time since I became a fan, because of what happened at the Everton match that we talked about last week, Simon, where some people were wondering, who were at the pub with us, why are we cheering for Aaron Lennon? It made me realize I am no longer the newbie around here. There are newer. It's not a generational thing. It's like every 5 years there's going to be like this new wave of fandom that's going to approach young adults that, hey, what's this all about? And they go to a pub and they have a good time and sing a couple of songs and then they're hooked. Whoever the club is, whatever. It's going to be really interesting to see what the future holds, though. I think it's going to become bigger, and the game. Simon, I think the thing that I'm trying to understand when I'm talking about this is I am worried that how this game is officiated is not going to keep up with how the rest of the world's games are officiated. If that makes any sense to you, what I'm trying to say, things are so regimented, I guess I mean, in basketball and hockey and baseball and football, that some of the rules, and we talked about this, I think, last week, are very subjective, and that unless that there is some kind of ethos or something put in place that makes the criteria a little more rigid across the board. We saw a lot of things today. Moussa Dembele, if Kevin Friend is not the referee, and I'd love to have Vass on this show to talk about this, somebody else may have booked him 3 times in that match if they could have.
Yeah, I mean, he definitely deserved the yellow card in the first half. I think his last tackle, even he knew it, and he was surprised he didn't get booked at that point. Yeah. But as I said last week, that is the difference between the sport and before the sport really gained the popularity it's enjoying right now. Americans just did not get, well, what do you mean that the clock just keeps running? Well, it's just the way it is, and you could do it a different way and have the referee stop it and then to 45, but it would dilute the excitement that we enjoy by an extra time, an added time winner. So it's you can't change that part of the culture of the game, I'm afraid, and I don't think you want to. Adding technology, as we discussed last week, it's all well and good, and if it's for the betterment of the game, that's great. But I don't think you change the culture of what's gone on for centuries, decades before. It's what makes the game great right now. I think you can go back to what you recall as your first real image of the Premier League, and that's the City win over QPR that won them the title. And when did they score that goal? Stoppage time.
I don't know. The future is gonna be very interesting. Let's just end it with that. I'm looking to see if there's any other. Okay, so Nick at Nick Play on Twitter. Sam, this is a good one for you. How long will Poch stay at Tottenham? As long as he is allowed. Will any events cause him to choose to leave or be asked to leave? I think he is amazing and a capable coach. I just don't know what his aspirations are. I will admittedly say I've not finished yet Guillaume Balaguer's book on Pochettino, so I don't know if his aspirations were discussed in the book. I don't know if we touched on that during his interview. What do you think about a question like that?
I think he wants to build something. I think he wants to stay here a long time. I think he's an intelligent guy. I think that even though he may, have a dream to coach in Madrid, I think that's the classic sort of more money, more problems, and the challenges that he would be faced with at Madrid are completely different than the level of expectations that he faces here at Spurs. And I think he's got an opportunity where he'll be given a patient shot at really building something lasting. So, I mean, barring some just horrid run of performances, I mean, I think that he could be here a very, very long time, and I think that coincides with what he's said in the press.
Yeah, I guess that makes sense to me. I think that. I think Levy is giving him the freedom to do a lot in terms of building, and I think he fully understands. Look, we've got a stadium that has not turned into $1 billion investment or £1 billion investment. That was supposed to be a £400 million investment, and that money is not one of these things that is a luxury at Tottenham. It never has been. We try to at least differentiate the fact that the stadium money and the transfer kitty are 2 different buckets of money, but it all comes from the same source. So, it has to be budgeted, and right now I just don't think it makes financial or fiscal sense for Tottenham to go out and spend a bunch of money on players. So, at Brazil Poch, Mark asks, and Tim, I'll direct this one to you. There were many opportunities to counter today, but we didn't have the pace to break. Could have done with bringing someone on that was rapid or keeping Sonny on, but that's another story. Should we be looking at this now? And if so, who could we possibly bring in? So, the arbitrary, unknown, French speedy winger, we've kind of joked about that before. But, Tim, is there really a viable option out there in the winter? I don't think so.
I mean, I think the 2 players that have been in the rumor mill this past week, Malcolm and Lucas. Those are probably the 2 players that would fit that role. I mean, Lucas, I talked about him a couple weeks ago when we did our winter transfer window pod. PSG needs to sell players to maintain within the financial fair play restrictions. If they go negative 27 million pounds over a 3-year period, they get hit with sanctions. And once that move for Mbappe becomes finalized, they're going to be in the red. It won't happen for sanctions this year, but they need to start looking ahead before next June so that they don't get hit with those restrictions.
I love you,
so
Tim.
Lucas
You made such a
perfect
shit-hot fire call on this like months ago.
Yes, you did.
Months ago.
I don't give a crap
Nobody.
what anybody says. If that actually happens, I am making sure that God and everybody knows Tim called.
There wasn't one podcast, at least that I'm aware of, that brought that up.
Well, I mean, and the whole thing behind that was the winter window is so tough. It's going to take something like a player going into 6 months left on their contract or a club being forced to sell because of financial fair play restrictions. Something like that is what would cause us to get a player right now. The other player that people have been talking about is Malcolm from Bordeaux. But if you're talking about getting someone for a bargain, this is not that player, because he just re-signed a long-term contract at the end of September. Bordeaux is not selling him at a bargain.
Yeah. Well, and that was going to be my next question to you. When you talk about these two players, what is the transfer fee estimation and wages for that player?
Wages, I have no clue. Transfer fee for Lucas, I've heard it's around, around 20, somewhere between 25 to like 33, somewhere around that.
Seems
and
more
then
than
for
reasonable.
Malk,
That's more than reasonable for a player like him.
The thing with him is he's on a little bit over 100,000 per week wages, so I think that's where the sticking point is. But something we've talked about before is, okay, you can go to another club and get an extra 10 to 20,000 pounds per week, but when you're in a season leading up to a World Cup, does sitting on the bench and earning that extra money matter that much to you as opposed to missing out on going to Russia?
But I don't think he's really been in the Seleção's frame. He's never really been a Brazil national team player, though, has he?
He wasn't for the last World Cup. He got left out. He's played for the national team, but he got left out of the last World Cup. But if he has any hopes of making it, he is not playing at PSG. I think he's played 2-3 games this season as sub appearances. He doesn't play there because when they brought in Mbappe and Neymar, he's lost his spot.
Yeah, now, I mean that's no crime, right? I mean it's no crime to lose your spot to those players.
No, it's not. But I know Sam likes it. We were talking about at the pub. We're targeting these Brazilians now. We know Sam likes Brazilians.
Man, I gotta be honest with you. This Malcolm kid, right? He speaks lovely French, so he's got to be a smart boy. So I say sign him. Look, we spent a good solid 2 minutes on YouTube today looking at him, and I saw like two scorchers that he scored from like 35 yards out.
10 seconds.
Yeah,
and you saw those scorchers.
We say sign him.
Let's sign him. Let's do it.
2 thumbs up.
Put Sam in the boardroom.
Two goals on YouTube, and he speaks French. So we say sign him.
The thing with those two players, I mean, I think that's the type of signing we need. Like I said earlier in this podcast, who cares if you're going to take someone's spot on the starting 11? I'd rather have one of those two coming in instead of Sissoko. I would have rather had one of those two players on the pitch today starting instead of Sissoko.
Yeah, that I can agree with. And, oh, by the way, Sessegnon scored 2 more goals this week for Fulham. Just to continue on with the transfer rumor mill, I still think that he's still our, at least in the winter, sign him or don't sign anyone and loan him back.
If we don't get him now, we're not getting him. I don't think we're going to get him if we don't sign him now.
Hey, did Barkley get any minutes for Chelsea this weekend?
I don't know.
I know they won big. I just didn't know whether he got to play or not. They went 3-0 with 15 minutes. So I figured he might have got it. He might have gotten in. My whole beef about that thing was he's not fit. You never play for us, all that, and I get the impression that he.
Yeah, you talk about bargains, right? 15 million. That was a bargain.
The thing is, when people are always talking about, he'd never play for us. Well, yeah, maybe when you're setting your fucking lineup on FIFA, he wouldn't play. But That's not the real world. You're going to have people come down with the flu like we had today. Like, you need that depth throughout your